Back in the year 1979, a group of friends decided to turn in for the night while on their way to Spain. Geoff Simpson, Pauline Simpson, along with their friends Lynn Gisby and Cynthia Gisby, found a somewhat comfortable motel and decided that they would retire there for the night. Upon entering this motel, they were informed that the motel was booked up for the night and that they should take a gander at the hotel down the road. The tired group walked down the narrow road, noticing some unique details about the path that they were taking. The one detail, which Pauline specifically remembered, were the old advertisements for circuses. In her own words, "It was a very old-fashioned circus. That's what piqued our interest." For this reason, the old circus advertisements have stuck in their heads since. After some time, they noticed a building up ahead, which they safely assumed was the hotel that they had been looking for. After talking to someone who was standing outside the building, they were informed that the building was actually an inn, not a hotel. They decided to continue their search down the road and eventually ran into two other buildings. One of these buildings was a police station. The other was the hotel they had been searching for. The interior was, so to say, different. It couldn't be described as old-fashioned, but there was no sign of any modern designs or objects. There were no telephones or elevators, a lack of materialistic design, and the majority of the furniture was made from wood. The couples got themselves 2 rooms and headed up to the bed only to find that the rooms were just as strange as the rest of the hotel. Neither of the rooms had been equipped with door locks, but rather wooden hatches. The rooms shared a bathroom, which had been equipped with very outdated plumbing, and the bed sheets were very heavy and thick. The couples quickly ate and headed to bed. The next morning, they awoke to find themselves even more surprised. Upon the sunlight shining through the windows, they noticed that the windows were merely shutters without glass. They headed to the dining room, describing the breakfast as simplistic and the coffee as black and horrible, as described by Geoff. Something that caught their eye, which has stuck in their mind since, was a woman who entered the dining room after them and sat directly across from them. She held a small dog under her arm, but her clothing was what stood out. She was dressed in a silk gown, implying that she had just returned from some sort of party. Pauline stated, "It was strange. It looked as though she had just returned from a ball of some sorts, but it was currently 7 in the morning, and I couldn't take my eyes off her." Following on from this, 2 policemen entered the room wearing old and simply out-of-the-place uniforms. Geoff stated, "Their uniforms looked very old, definitely not something I'd expect to see nowadays," and described them as wearing dark blue uniforms and also wearing capes. When they were leaving the hotel, Geoff and Lynn spoke to the policemen about which would be the best way in which they can take the auto route to both Avignon and the Spanish border. Neither of the officers appeared to understand what the men were talking about. Thus, the men simply assumed that they hadn't made accurate translations. The couples were given bad directions, which would have resulted in them being stuck on an old road, several miles out from civilization. They decided that they would use a map to find their own way there. but nonetheless thanked them. Upon checking out of the hotel, Geoff spotted that they had only been charged a total of 19 francs. Assuming that a mistake had been made, he reminded the manager that all four of them had ate at the hotel, as well as having stayed there, to which the manager reassured him that it had all been taken into account for in the bill. Although confused on how little the bill was, Geoff paid in cash and the couples left the building. After 2 weeks of traveling, the couples decided to return home, and upon remembering how cheap the hotel was that they stayed at, they decided that they would give it another shot and stay there for the night. However, even though they had followed the exact directions to where the hotel was located on the map, they struggled to find it. Pauline stated that this is without a doubt the road that it was on. Everyone agreed for the simple fact that they saw the old-fashioned circus posters still plastered along the walls. They followed the map, made several changes to their route, but still had no luck in finding the hotel. This arose the question, where could the hotel have gone? Especially if they were so sure that it was where they were looking. The couples decided to go even further back on their route and return to the motel where they had first visited. They arrived at the motel and inquired at the desk, telling the men working there that a man in a plum uniform had told them about the hotel. The man told them that there was no one of that description currently working there, and that they had no knowledge of a hotel existing where they had stayed. They drove to and from the hotel's location several times, but had no luck in it showing up. Instead of continuing their search, they drove to another hotel in Lyons, which cost them a total of 240 francs, a huge step up from the cheap hotel that they'd previously stayed in. Once they returned home from their travels, Geoff and Lynn had their camera rolls processed so that they could see the pictures of the hotel, which they had taken for themselves. After they had them processed, they found that the pictures of the hotel were nowhere to be found. They should have been in the middle of the camera roll, but simply weren't there. According to a reporter, there was clear evidence that the camera had attempted to take a photo, as there are sprocket holes on the negative images which show damage has been inflicted. Over the years, both of the couples have kept their story to themselves and decided only to tell some of their close family members and friends. After pondering for some time, it was one of their friends who later read about the uniforms which the French policemen wore. These uniforms were those which were worn in France shortly before 1905. There is no logical explanation for what could have caused this occurrence other than time travel. According to Geoff, only they know what happened that night.